All right, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight at the reopening information meeting. Very happy that you're here, and I want to share with you who we have on the panel tonight, and then I'll give you a brief overview of our plan for tonight to get you the information that you need to make a very important decision for your student and your family. So joining us on the panel tonight, we have several individuals who may be answering questions throughout the evening. Also some people who will be presenting information that we hope will answer most of the questions that you have on your mind. My name is Russell Lisong, Superintendent. We also have our Executive Cabinet here, Leona Olson, our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. We have Sarah Jocham, our Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, John Drake, who's the Acting Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Tim Holcomb, Kurt Baumeister, who's our Executive Director of Secondary, Kurt Sir, who's our Executive Director of Elementary, Mike Shaka, who is the principal of the new virtual school, which we're calling Cloud Campus. We have Janice Mishney, who is our Director of Educational Technology. Jonathan Geisler, our Director of Purchasing and Warehouse. Mary Groska, our Director of Health Services. Lance Bidnick, Director of Maintenance and Operations. Candy Barella, Director of Special Education Services. We also have Annette Franco, our Public Information Officer, and her assistant who's going to help us moderate, Adriana Angulo, and Javier Zamora will be doing our Spanish translation for this evening. So we've got quite a group here prepared to do our best to answer questions this evening. So what I have on the agenda here is our plan of action. We anticipate a lot of attendees at this meeting. And likely a lot of questions to be asked and hopefully answered this evening. And so the purpose of this information meeting is to provide you with as much information as we can possibly provide to you as parents in order for you to make the best decision in terms of this coming school year of whether the choice is to take advantage of the virtual learning school for the school year, or to remain in the 3-level plan, which would shift depending on the circumstances. And so I want to point out, first of all, that we have a lot of resources on our district webpage. And if you have not accessed that, I highly encourage you to do that, because many of the questions that are being asked via email and some of the questions that were presented even before this meeting started could be answered and is answered on our webpage and in our reopening plan that was sent out to all parents last Friday. So we try to put as much information in there. Obviously, there's more detailed questions that may come up tonight that we hope to be able to answer. I also want to point you to our board meetings. And yesterday we had a very lengthy presentation on reopening related to the virtual school option, distance learning, as well as multiple of the safety measures that we believe are critically important as parents. So we presented almost 3 hours. And so if you have not seen that, that meeting will be posted on YouTube later on this evening. I was told that that was in the process of being uploaded, so it may be up now, but definitely by this evening. So we don't plan to duplicate the 2 hours and 45 minutes of presentations and Q&A that we had last night, but we will present some information tonight that we hope will be meaningful. But if you want more details and you want to see that board meeting, that is going to be on YouTube. We also have our site principals who can answer questions, our school community facilitators for those schools that have that resource. That's another place that people can ask questions and seek information. Okay. Now I want to review just the key question before we talk about how to answer, how and when to ask a question, and also the presentations. But here is the key question that we are posing to you as parents. And that is, do you want the parent choice virtual learning option, which we're calling Cloud Campus, for your student? And we are saying that this is a year commitment, a year commitment. This is a question that's been asked by a lot of parents, is why can't we allow switches to happen during the school year? And I know this is something that we had previously hoped to be able to do and we announced, but we had to change that decision. And the decision is based on the fact that if we have large number of students, which we anticipate we're going to have a large number of students taking this virtual learning option, if we have large number of students shifting back and forth in the middle of the year, that is really a significant impact to all schools and all programs and all classrooms in the entire district. We basically could be in a situation where we're reconstituting and reformulating our entire master schedule in all of our schools. So because of that significant impact, we did have to make this change. So we are asking parents to make this decision very carefully and be prepared to commit to that decision for the entire 2021 school year. And so it's the choice of the virtual learning, or it's to be in this 3-level plan, which means that this could change depending on the circumstances. We already announced that we will be starting the year in level 3, which is distance learning. But as the conditions improve in the county and we make a decision, we could be moving to a modified in-person level 2. Or if conditions get even better and we are allowed, and it's safe to do so, to go back to 100% in person, we would all be thrilled and we would move there. But this is a very important point to understand, that if you choose the virtual learning option, that is a commitment for the whole year. If you do not choose that, you will be in the 3-level plan, and that will switch depending on the circumstances. I also want to illustrate, there's another circumstance. We could be in a level 2, and be in a level 1, and there might be several cases of COVID-19, which then forces that particular school to move to level 3 and to switch to distance learning. So this shifting concept could occur if it's an overall county thing, overall district thing, or it could be exclusive to a school site. So definitely want you to understand that particular concept. So with that in mind, again, this is the school reopening plan that I mentioned is on our website. It's on our website. So if you have not looked at it, this could answer a lot of questions. And here is the table of contents of that reopening plan. So as you can see, there's a lot of different categories, a lot of information on different areas related to next year and the reopening. Okay, at this time, we want to go over how we will entertain questions in an organized fashion. So I'm going to ask Mike Shaka, who's the principal of our new virtual school, to go over how this is done.
Thank you, Russell. So I just wanted to first start off by letting everyone know we have an audience of approximately 1,983 participants, which is fantastic. I'm glad that we have so much interest and involvement in these very big decisions. With that large number comes some challenges and limitations into the format of this presentation. So I wanted to let you know that our goal for this presentation is to have the most functional, interactive format possible. So I see the questions of how can I ask questions and how will they be answered. Our process is going to be participants can enter the questions in real time in the Q&A feature on the Zoom webinar. Hand raising is not going to be a function, and our chat is disabled. It will be the Q&A function where you're able to ask questions, and then we have a group of moderators that will be reading those questions and then synthesizing them into questions that we can answer to the whole group. Please, again, keep in mind with 1,900 plus people, we'll do our very best to get to as many questions as possible. But in the event we do not get to your question, There is also a transcript of these questions that we will have access to after this, and we will add those answers to the best of our ability to the FAQ sheet and send that out to the community. So just want to let you know that we will do our best to answer the questions in the time allotted. Please wait to enter your questions until we enter the Q&A section of this first segment. I see that some are already starting to come in, and I don't want to lose track of them. So if you can wait until we have our Q&A slide a little ways into this presentation, that would be very helpful for us to make sure we don't miss anything. In addition, the more succinct you can be, the better, so we can get right to the point and really make sure we understand the question. Listing multiple questions at once provides confusion, and we may not be able to get to all of those. So I just want to go over that format and make sure you know that our goal is to understand those questions and do our very best to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Shaka. I'm going to go back to the this slide here. I'm going to do a better job of explaining how this is going to function now that you know how and when to ask a question. So the way we're going to format this to keep it organized is that we're going to give some information to everybody in the form of a presentation. And then after that presentation topic, we will then answer questions. Okay, so the first two areas that we're going to cover is the virtual school option, the cloud campus, and distance learning. And once we present that information, hopefully that answers a lot of questions. And then we will pause at that point to answer questions that are submitted. And then we're going to talk about the 3-level plan. I'll give some information on that. We'll pause again and answer questions related to the 3-level plan. And then finally, we have a section of safety measures. And we'll cover some of those topics. We did a lot of that last night. And then again, pause for Q&A. And then if there's anything else left at the end, we will do that. And we've allotted approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours for this meeting. Hopefully that will we'll be able to get through most of the questions. And if not, like Dr. Shaka said, that we'll be able to address that either with the individual person or via some FAQ at a later time. Okay, so that's the plan. And so now let me jump back here, and we're going to start with our first presentation on distance learning and virtual school.
All right, good evening. My name is John Drake. I'm the Acting Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, and want to frame our conversation. Russell, if we can go to the next slide, frame our conversation in a little bit of reflection of where we were. And then I'll turn it over to Jenith and Mike Shaka to talk about where we're going with our both cloud campus and our distance learning for kids. But the reality is we spent a lot of time reflecting on our experience in this past spring, as well as the feedback received from parents, students, and staff in order to make some decisions and recognize that there were some rough edges for sure in the spring. We had wide parameters of schedules and minimums and maximums of time spent in this virtual world teaching and learning. And so we've made some adjustments, and we want to talk a little bit tonight about some the more clear parameters that and expectations that we're providing for staffs and families, as well as some consistent schedules, structures, and classroom routines that will be part of our distance learning, virtual learning school. And then also really focusing on meeting the needs of all of our different learners with both face-to-face and asynchronous or non-face-to-face teaching and learning opportunities. In essence, we recognize that in order to smooth out some of these rough edges from the spring, moving into the fall, making a plan to support kids in virtual learning, we need to provide clear expectations with a focus on making sure students are accessing all of the big ideas and content of their grade level or secondary content specific class in order to matriculate into the next grade level. The state actually did us gave us some help, that they recognized the need to provide us some guidance as well. And they provide us with some guideposts that I'm going to ask Jenith Mishny to share with us and how they'll be playing out in Newport-Mesa.
Thank you. Russell, next slide. Yeah, so as Mr. Drake said, we were really fortunate to have the state come out with some standards, guideposts for us to really kind of unpack and understand and use as we are making plans for the fall. I'm going to briefly just go over them and point out some of the ones that are probably more pertinent to your questions. I do want to also note that if we see a question that got answered in our presentation, we are going to dismiss it, just so you know, so that we're not just dismissing it, not answering it, but we feel that we answered it. All right, so live interaction. Live interaction really has to do with that school-home connectedness, making sure that teachers have daily live interaction with all students and that students have an interaction with their friends, their peers. And so that means whether it's through a synchronous environment like this, through Zoom or something similar, or it could be, for the teacher part, it could be a phone call, but it has to be a two-way call, right? They have to actually connect. So really critical, and you will see synchronous instruction throughout our schedules a little later. Attendance is going to be mandatory. But you know, mandatory in a number of ways throughout the day through synchronous and asynchronous activities. The state put minimum instruction hours for the grade levels, and so it's a minimum, it's not a max, and so minimum daily instruction that can be met by a combination of both teacher instruction and what they're calling time value of work assigned. So that just means let's say we showed up here and I had some live instruction and we had some, you know, we met for 30 minutes and then the student goes off and does some asynchronous work on their own. That, you know, you really could put a value, a time value, say that activity that I'm giving my students is going to take them about 30, 45 minutes. So calculating that throughout the day. So including both of those, you can see 3 hours per day for kindergartners, 3 hours and 50 minutes for grades 1 to 3, and 4 hours for grades 4 through 12. So we will absolutely, you know, meet the needs of all of our students, including special students with special needs and our EL learners. And if you could go to the next slide. And then we come to live instruction, which is a little different than live interaction. I always love a good play on words. So this is that synchronous time. And we've done a lot of research over the last couple months getting prepared for what we're about to embark on again. And we found that there was a lot of research and talking to experts in the field around keeping the synchronous time to about 30 minutes at a time for students in smaller group sizes. And Dr. Shaka will talk to this more a little bit. But I can tell you, I don't know if you see my Zoom burn, but I have it because I've spent too many hours on Zoom. And it's not good for our health. So we really are going to have a good balance of synchronous and asynchronous time. We're also going to obviously prevent disengagement and really work on re-engaging any student that is absent even for a day, but the state puts it at 3 days. And connectivity is a priority for us, as well as weekly engagement records. Next slide. I have to click twice, sorry. All right, so a lot of questions are out there about what's the difference, virtual school, distance learning. So we want to say that both of these have, you know, rigorous and high quality content. They're both aligned to California state standards. They will both be using district adopted curriculum. If many of you watched the meeting last night, we did get approval for curriculum, digital curriculum for the virtual school, which is Florida Virtual School Global Content. And so we'll both of the options will look at social emotional learning for all students, rich instruction by our teachers with experience in technologies for both options. And again, that balance of live and independent learning, as well as, of course, deep commitment to teaching and learning, and adaptability and support in this online experience for all students. Our virtual school, we know that in the fall, many students thrived in that environment, and that was one of the reasons that we really felt strongly about starting a virtual school, is that we had so many students that really had a good experience with it. And so that virtual school will have a more flexible schedule, and the structure will be designed for virtual learning. Teachers and staff are committed to specializing in virtual learning for the long term, because the school does plan to be around. We're not getting rid of it when COVID goes away. And so we're also asking for that long-term commitment from our students. And the distance learning, you know, those students want to get back. Their goal is to get back into the classroom, be in that face-to-face environment. Those teachers and staff are committed to consistent high-quality instruction, but they'll have to deal with that transitioning between the levels. And the structure of distance learning will be more aligned to going back to the brick and mortar school. Now, Mike Shaka is going to come back and talk to you a little more about the school, virtual school.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Shaka. I'm the principal of our new Newport-Mesa Cloud Academy. I'm so glad so many of us are joining us to learn a little bit more and to help get as much information as possible on this very important decision of what next year's schooling is going to look like for your child. We are our newly branded Cloud Campus. We have our website, which is listed below, and it is a burgeoning website. So as soon as information becomes available, we do our best to keep it updated. Clearly, information is consistently being updated, so it's a great place to go to get whatever is most accurate and most recent for information regarding Cloud Campus. We go to the next slide. So our big question is, what's next year going to look like for my son or daughter if I choose Newport-Mesa Cloud Campus? And again, Newport-Mesa Cloud Campus is that year-long commitment of online instruction, virtual learning for the entire year. We really wanted to take a hard look at a couple pieces of information as we designed what this experience was going to look like for students. First and foremost, we looked at research, and there is a large body of research that really helps us understand best practices for virtual learning. In addition, there was quite a few lessons learned this last quarter on what was more and less effective in terms of instruction for students at different age levels and in different scenarios. So the first thing that we really are going to focus on for the Newport-Mesa Cloud Campus is an effective balance between synchronous and asynchronous instruction. You'll see in just a few moments, I'm going to share a sample schedule of both elementary and secondary, and you'll be able to see how we're balancing both that synchronous and asynchronous time throughout an average day and or week for a student. In addition, what we're finding is there is quite a bit of research dictating group size for Zoom sessions, for example. What's an effective size of group for students to deliver different forms of instruction? So we really took that into consideration. You're going to see very explicit small group sizes throughout the day for our Cloud Campus experience. We also took a look at how to best use our synchronous time. Synchronous time is that time where the teacher is live interacting with the students. And what we found is there is some very good uses for teachers' time and some less effective uses of teachers' time. So we're really focused on those highest and best uses of time. For example, we're going to use those times where teachers are interacting with small groups of students, where they're providing feedback, where they're listening and responding to student thought, to where student voice is really driving a lot of that synchronous time. And then finally, in the Newport-Mesa Cloud Campus, looking very, very deliberately at the organization of a teacher's day. If we look at small group instruction for students, sometimes that means multiple group meetings with students to go for the teacher to go over the same curriculum, and being very cognizant of how teachers are organizing their day to best instruct our students. You're going to see examples of this in the office hour setting of our secondary schedule, for example, so you can get a better idea of really how we organize this teacher's day to support our students. So what we're looking at here is just a sample week at a glance for a 6th grade class in the virtual school. And there's a few things I really want to point out, because that's the biggest question I've gotten as principal of Cloud Campus is, what's my student's day going to look like? So you can see in this sample, and each week is not going to be identical. The Cloud Campus is really built for flexibility and responsiveness to the students and the class's needs. But you can see that most days they start the day with a whole group live meeting. That's the whole class meeting together, but you only have that for about 10 minutes. And it's really designed as a check-in, to community build with the students, and then to go off into more small group or asynchronous learning. So if you look at Tuesday, for example, after that 10 minutes, the students immediately break up into small group sessions where groups of 10 students spend 30 minutes with their teacher receiving instruction for writing, for example, or math. Then you see outlined in green is that asynchronous instruction. So while kids are not in a synchronous learning, they're working in an asynchronous format to move their learning forward. For example, they might be watching a video of direct instruction pre-teaching a certain concept. They might be reading an article and annotating to build ideas that they're going to later discuss with their small groups and their teacher. So there's a variety of instructional strategies that we'll use during that asynchronous time. I think a good rule of thumb, and again, a question I get fairly often, is how much time can I expect for my students to engage in synchronous live instruction each day? And as a rule, you're going to see students engaging in between 60 and 90 minutes of of synchronous learning each day. So kind of keep that in mind. While it's not always going to be 90 minutes or 60 minutes, that's the range we're really shooting for. And again, that's backed by experience and research. But that is rarely, if ever, going to exist in one big block of time. The goal is to break it up into smaller chunks. Normally we cap that at 30 minutes so that the kids can most effectively engage with that synchronous curriculum. Next slide. In addition, at the Cloud Campus, we look at a year at a glance planning. And what I wanted to share this slide is we've already made significant progress mapping out our entire year to ensure that all major content is covered. I know distance learning and virtual learning is new to a lot of us, so we wanted to backwards map and plan out the entire year to ensure that the students got all the core curriculum and we didn't run out of time or skip some important learning standards. So this is just a screenshot, but I wanted to highlight that work has already been done and will continue to be done for our Cloud Campus to ensure that, that virtual pacing. What we're looking at right here is an example of a secondary schedule. So this could be middle school, high school. And I just used the word schedule, but that's something we're trying to move away from in the Cloud Campus and use the words protected time, because it doesn't function in the same way as a schedule. It doesn't have that same rigidity of a student must be logged into a synchronous session at a specific time. In contrast, Cloud Campus has protected time where the students' period 1 Monday would be protected time from 8 to 8:45. But that could look like a variety of things. In addition, it's not necessarily the only time the student would engage with period 1 during that day. So it's really designed to be, again, responsive and flexible based off the needs of the students and the class. If you look at the afternoon, something we really wanted to spend a lot of time thinking about and allocating time properly was the afternoon session that previously were referred to as office hours, but we've moved away from that term as well in the Cloud Campus and have really specified the best uses and the most appropriate uses of time for both students and teachers in those afternoon sessions. So for example, students might be working in peer groups with each other to share ideas, to talk, to discuss. Teachers might be working one-on-one with students. Teachers might be reaching out to students who didn't quite demonstrate subject mastery or didn't appear to gain all the instruction of the day. Students might be engaged in asynchronous learning in the afternoon. Again, some of those asynchronous examples that I gave. And finally, and arguably one of the most important, is teachers are going to be providing feedback, actionable feedback to students, really celebrating that iterative process of learning to where the kids produce some sort of work, and the teacher spends time giving them feedback and then holding them accountable to acting upon that feedback. And if you look at the final afternoon slot, you have that 2 to 3 slot for teacher planning and collaboration. That's going to be very important in the schedule.
Dr. Shaka, can you just explain the Wednesday? Because on this slide, it just shows Wednesday odd classes. What about the even classes on Wednesday?
That's a great question, Russell. So this is a sample of 1 week in a 2-week rotation. So what we have here is you see Monday first period, Wednesday first period, Friday first period. You see Tuesday and Thursday second period is how you start your day. So the following week, you would start on Monday with your even classes, periods 2, 4, 6, and 8. So you would meet with those even classes 3 times a week that following week, to where every 2 weeks you'll meet with your class 5 times. We can go to the next slide.
Okay. So a little in contrast to the virtual school is our distance learning plan, if you so choose to maintain the option when appropriate and safe to return to regular campus for face-to-face instruction. And a couple things to consider here. One of the designs of our distance learning is to make sure that it can be a smooth transition between the different levels, level 1, 2, and 3, of return to school, or through the continuum of distance learning. And that transition can be made smoothly both for teachers and students. So there is an effort on our part with the distance learning to make sure that even in distance learning, kids are in school at a distance, obviously, but in the regular bell schedule that they would have if and when the time comes that we're returning to the campus. To support that ease of transition as well. Along the same lines, I want to be upfront and honest and say, with the work that's been done for the cloud campus and the learning that's been done, we don't want to duplicate those efforts and have our teachers have to do all of that all over again for themselves. So we are utilizing the learnings and some of the thinking of our virtual schools to support the distance learning. And so if we look at the next slide, you'll see a very similar secondary distance learning schedule to what you saw in the cloud campus. The difference here being flexibility. Remember, our goal, one of our goals or designs for distance learning is that there's a smooth transition back into the regular campus schedule. So very similar to what you saw in cloud campus, there are odd days and even days. That Wednesday every other week will rotate either odd or even. But you'll see this is a little more time bound to 45 minutes in a distance, so that when and if we return, we could expand that. Part of the difference here being, if your first period class is English, that's what you're going to be doing during that 8 to 8:45 block of time, unlike the flexibility that the virtual school has. So the periods will be less flexible in relation to content. But very similar in relation to structure, time, delivery, minutes of face-to-face instruction. Also recognize that the periods being 45 minutes in length does not mean that's when the learning and teaching is finished. There will be a whole asynchronous component to the teaching and learning, as well as some independent work outside of that 45 minutes. But for each of those sections, kids will be face-to-face with peers and teachers for those blocks of time. You'll also notice we have office hours 4 of the 5 days a week, very similar to the virtual school, with a focus. Last year they were kind of, or in the spring, loosely organized around drop-in and some support provided to students. And we're really going to focus our efforts in 3 areas for our office hours. One will be outreach to those students who need additional support, as well as students' ability to drop in on their own. There will also be some specific support provided, scheduled during that time with students from teachers, and the teachers will also focus on re-engaging students who we haven't seen for a day or two, reaching out and making sure that if there are any barriers that are preventing students from participating, that we're utilizing any of our resources to support them to re-engage in the distance learning. Also, you'll notice that Wednesday there are not office hours on Wednesdays. We want to be able to make sure that we're taking care of the operational things with our staffs through staff meetings, as well as providing them the professional development that's going to continue to support their learning and support of kids in this environment as well. Next slide, Jenith.
Yes. Okay. So we pulled together a great team of teachers, TK through 12, early July, to really, they were a design team to come together and start planning our virtual school. And at that time, we didn't know what the fall would look like, but we didn't know that we were going to be in level 3 distance learning. And so we had a few weeks with this design team working on the virtual school schedules and what we wanted it to look like. And at the TK6 level, we're using the current ELA and math curriculum and, you know, aligning that and really created a pretty robust schedule. And then we found out distance learning, it's happening. We have no choice. And we thought, well, why do a duplication of efforts, as Mr. Drake said. So we took that schedule, and we couldn't just use the same schedule because, again, for distance learning, we have to keep in mind that those students are going to someday go back into the classroom, and we want that transition to be easy on them and not have them all over the place. And we also recognized that across the board, we wanted, you know, we heard all of our parents, teachers, stakeholders in June through that thought exchange, and we really wanted to have more consistent schedules, more consistent structure. We had the distance learning standards come out, which were really helpful as guideposts. And so we just took the same schedule that we're using and had created, and we just really, these are like instructional blocks if you think of them like that, and we just moved them around to be more, there's synchronous time in the morning, that band of blue, and early, you know, every morning all kids are online doing community building and, you know, getting to know their class and their teacher and spending some time together. And then a small group will stay, and then that teacher will rotate through small groups in the morning. And then during the middle of the day, students will all be working asynchronously, but that means that the teacher's also working alongside the student, but they're not necessarily on a Zoom. They're, you know, maybe in Google Classroom or Google Doc or doing an activity in Seesaw, and the teacher's giving feedback, or you know, there's all kinds of different things. That's also some time where teachers can have some prep time and reflection. And then when they come back in the afternoon, whether they did math in the morning or ELA in the morning, they would do the other content area, and they might, you know, have some science, social studies, but they also can check in and say, you know, how did that activity go? How did you do on, you know, your math problems? Show me what you did. And so there's more consistency throughout the day, and you know, of course, allowing time for intervention and ELD, designated ELD time, and things like that. So everyone's really excited that we have a consistent and you know, structured schedule across the board. So K2 looks a little different, but similarly. And again, we're sticking with that idea that for academic instruction, 30 minutes is really that magic number that really a student would be on a Zoom session, you know, give or take. But that's those are some of the guideposts and standards we're sticking with. Next slide. Okay, so just so everyone knows, we are definitely looking at, you know, professional development and parent education across the board. If ever this is the year for personalized learning, we are all, you know, all over the place in our levels. And so that path to really identifying individual needs across the board, whether, you know, it's a teacher, classified staff member, our students, and then parents. So we will be offering lots of different opportunities once we're back in session. We've offered some optional things, but of course, once we're back in session, we'll continue that throughout the year. We're looking at some different parent education series this year, putting some screencasts on YouTube, but also holding more, you know, Friday coffee talk or different opportunities so parents can, you know, ask questions or get support or whatever it might be. We are rolling out a portal that will really help. It's called ClassLink, and that will pull all of our many programs that we use across the board. So as a parent, I would log in and I'd see School Loop, Schoology, Seesaw, you know, Google Classroom, depending on what you, Peachjar, Blackboard, you know, Titan, whatever, you know, your school and your student might use would be there. Same for our students, our staff, and our teachers. And a single sign-on. It also gives us the ability to have little QR codes for the littles to help them logging into their Chromebook. They hold it up and then they go right to the portal and then everything's right there. So that will help parents as well. So we're really, you know, we're really listening to all of the feedback that we got in June, May and June through, you know, all of our thought exchange and things. We are also providing laptops to teachers. We will be one-to-one K-12 with Chromebooks. Hotspots will be available as needed. And then our technology helpline will continue to be available throughout the year. Okay, so this brings us to the Q&A section, and we have been going in. We do have, let's see, well over 300 questions. So we've been answering them, and when we answer them, they come back out and you see them. So let's see, go back up. So there's a question here about the waiver process, the elementary waiver.
Okay, actually, let's.
Oh, sorry, I'm sticking.
Virtual school and distance learning questions at this time.
All right, sorry,
Some of the questions we have are regarding if you choose the 100% virtual school, are you able to switch to the 3-level plan throughout the year? And if you choose the 3-level plan, are you able to switch to the virtual school?
Okay, I answered that question hopefully very clearly at the beginning, that the commitment for the virtual school, which is available now, is a commitment for the entire year. So when that choice is made, parents need to understand that is for the full school year. So therefore, if they choose not to do the virtual option, they're in the 3-level plan. They are in the 3-level plan for the remainder of the year or for the entire year. So it's very important to make that decision carefully with the understanding that that is for the entire year. And I stated at the beginning, the reason for that is because if we have shifting going on in the middle of the year with the significant numbers that we believe we are going to have in this option, it is really significantly impactful to every single school, every classroom, every program, every teacher, and therefore even students in a regular classroom. That classroom could be reconstituted and it would be very, very difficult. So unfortunately, that's why we had to make that change, but switching at this point is not going to be an option.
There's questions about AP honors enhanced classes at the Cloud Campus.
Yeah, I see a number of questions about electives, AP honors. It's really important to know that the Cloud Campus is going to have a very limited selection of choices for classes. We are guaranteeing that students will have access to their graduation and A to G required classes. So that is something we can promise and guarantee, that classes students need for A to G compliance or for graduation will be offered. However, when it comes to honors classes, AP, and specialty electives, some of those may be able to be offered, but many will not. And how I'm describing it right now is possibly some of our most popular AP classes like AP US History or AP Language. If there's enough of a demand, which we think there will be, those more traditional AP classes will be offered. Same with our 7th grade honors math. We anticipate that class being offered as well. But when it comes to the more unique AP classes, it is unlikely that those will be available. So if you're a student who takes a number of AP classes, it is unlikely all of the AP classes you are planning to take at your comprehensive secondary site will be available. Electives fall in that same category. We're going to offer electives that fit the needs of most kids, but the very exclusive electives are not going to be an option for the Cloud Campus.
There are questions related to would students need to be logged in for a specific amount of times during virtual learning, whether at the virtual school or distance learning. So a few questions about what the schedule and expectations look like.
So for distance learning, you know, we are saying attendance is mandatory. So the expectation would be that for those live sessions, you know, obviously there are excuses, whether live or distance, that are excused. But for the most part, we would expect students to participate in the live instruction, as well as any of the asynchronous or independent learning that's provided for them. And so, yes, attendance is still mandatory as if we are in brick and mortar as well.
And in contrast, at the Cloud Campus, will be a slightly different approach. We're looking at it more as participation is mandatory, but attendance in synchronous sessions, while highly valuable, there's a little bit more flexibility on that end in terms of the need to attend at a certain time. Now, there will certainly be synchronous components. They will certainly be valuable, but we are also building a model that will allow students the possibility of being successful, even if they are not able to log in all of the time to synchronous sessions.
PE at the Cloud Campus?
Yes, PE will be offered at the Cloud Campus.
Looking for the shorter ones.
There was a question that I saw earlier that I think people might want to know. And Jeneth, I believe you have the answer to this. And it's if a parent has already responded to the survey, but they have changed their mind based on the information that they've received after they submitted their response, and it's still before the deadline, can they change it? And how does that work?
Yes, they can change it. I would recommend they reach out to their principal, because they actually could, or they can reach out to me. I can help them with that, because I can just go in and make the change for them so they don't have to resubmit. So we'll share that in our follow-up.
One question is, what will families without internet be able to do to assist their students with distance learning or the virtual school?
Well, we are committed to make sure that every student has connectivity at home, regardless of what program or what school they attend. So if there is an issue with connectivity at home, we're encouraging students or parents to reach out to the principal, and we will do our best to assist. There is actually some statewide efforts to provide connectivity for all students in the state of California. This is a very high priority for all school districts. We're all in the same situation, that we want to make sure that all of our students have that access. But for our district, we will make sure that every student has that connectivity. And if there's an issue, we recommend that they reach out to their principal.
I see a number of questions about requests for sample schedules for TKK, different grade levels. We have sample schedules, and we will do our best to get some of those samples posted on the Cloud Campus website. Please keep in mind these are just samples, so that it is not a lockstep schedule. But we will do our best to get some more examples up there so you can get an idea of what those days could look like.
All right, Sarah, there's a lot of questions around special ed and services and how that will be handled in both distance learning and virtual school.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Right now, if you are in special education, your student receives special education services, you may apply to the virtual campus. And if it's a student who receives some specialized academic instruction or other related services such as speech and language, we will be able to accommodate that through the Cloud Campus, through that academy or through that campus. If it's a student who primarily has their services in a special day class, you may still apply to the Cloud Campus, and we will look at whether or not we are able to meet those IEP goals and services through that learning environment. And if not, we will put the student into our virtual learning program or our distance learning program until we come back to school. Ultimately, our goal is to have our special education students on campus as quickly as possible. I was reading in the questions, and I know there are a lot of concerns about the challenges of students with special needs learning through this type of a format. And one of the things we're adding this fall that we did not have utilized in the spring is our instructional assistants, and being able to have them support the teachers and do some breakout sessions during the Zoom to give some more individualized support to students. So that's where we are in terms of special education. And if there's real specific questions about your student and your services, I would encourage you to reach out to your case carrier once they're back and once school has started, or your special education coordinator, and we will look at how we can support your student and your family.
Thank you. There's questions about start time, distance learning, virtual school.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. Again, for Cloud Campus Elementary, we'll generally have a consistent start time of 8 a.m. is where it is right now. But that, again, there's flexibility based off of the students, the lesson, and what's needed for that particular day. But you can anticipate 8 a.m. being a general start time for most days for Cloud Campus. And for secondary, the same thing. 8 a.m. is when the protected time of period 1 and 2 begin.
Schools for distance learning, though, will stick to their current schedules. So whatever the current homeschool is, that's what time school will start. Again, trying to keep that transition the same. How will virtual school work with Estancia's 4x4?
So that's one of those questions we are in the process of working out the exact details. I anticipate getting some information out shortly, but we're in the earlier stages of figuring out exactly what that's going to look like.
Instructional materials at the cloud campus.
So that's one of the unique features of the cloud campus is we will have the instructional materials, the same instructional materials sent home with the students that are sent home in the traditional brick and mortar classes or classrooms. In addition, in secondary, the cloud campus is going to utilize Florida Virtual Curriculum, which is a curriculum built particularly for online learning.
And then I'm going to follow that up with a question. I just lost it. They popped. So at the elementary level in Cloud Campus, they also will, they'll have one teacher per grade level. The structure will be very similar in elementary school for Cloud Campus. And then again, like Dr. Shaka just said, curriculum at the elementary level is the same curriculum regardless of what school you go to. All right, looking, Mr. Lee Sung, how long should we?
Yeah. Okay, do we answer? I know there were many questions probably on the same topic, so we cover a good portion of those.
Yeah, there's over 800 questions right now, so it's really, we will definitely go through all of these, but I think in interest of time, we.
Okay. All right, move on to the next section. Okay. So now I want to talk a little deeper about the three-level plan. And so again, this is if parents choose not to do the virtual option, then students will be in a three-level plan depending on the circumstances. So as we've stated before, we will be starting the school year at level 3 in distance learning. And so you heard a little bit about that, but I want to go into if we get to the position where we are able to open in person to some degree, okay? There's social distancing requirements in place. There are other safety measures that need to be in place. But if we get to the point where we can have some in-person learning, we would move to level 2. And right now, the governor has an order that says that if we are on the watch list, and currently Orange County is, that we cannot reopen in person. And until the county comes off of that watch list and remains off the watch list for 14 days, we cannot reopen. So I did send a communication out to all staff and to all parents on how we would then determine when we could move to level 2. After the county is off the watch list, we wait the 14 days. We would then have to determine when it's appropriate to start with level 2. Now keep in mind, even though we are planning and preparing to be able to move from level 3 to level 2 as seamless as possible, there is going to be a significant amount of operations that we will have to get in place to be able to move to level 2. So that date will be specified and parents and staff will be given notice of when that is. I want to make this very clear that if we are waiting that 14-day period of being off the watch list, if the county goes back on the watch list, the clock starts all over again. But if we don't, it does not mean that we automatically open up in person on the 15th day. That date will be determined, and again, everyone will be given notice of when that start date is. So in this slide, we are describing the features of the elementary level 2. It's modified in person that we're calling the full day max 16. And the features of this is that students would be getting a half day of instruction with their teachers in the classroom. So it's approximately half of the class, but I'm not going to say it's exactly half. But the idea here is to maximize the space inside the classroom as much as possible, thus the name Max 16. And the students that are not able to be in the classroom, whether that's a pure 50-50 breakdown or some other percentage, we will be working to have extended learning on the other half day. Our board has given us a challenge to really provide, particularly our youngest kids at the elementary level, an opportunity to be on campus the full day. And so there are a lot of logistical challenges with this. Every school is a little bit different because it's depending on their size, depending on the number of students, actually depending per grade level, how many students are in each class and in each grade level. And on Wednesdays, we would have class in the morning, but in the afternoon, we would dedicate that for teacher professional development. So there would be no students on campus on Wednesdays afternoons. Now we have some sample learning activities that could be done during extended learning. And again, there's a lot of operational challenges to do this, but these were some of the ideas that came up that could be done during that extended learning time. We also want to make sure that we communicate that for parents who do not want their students to participate in that extended learning, that there will be a parent opt-out option for that. Our biggest challenge, as you can imagine, is having space to socially distance our students throughout the campus and to have enough personnel to properly supervise. There was some really good questions about, will students stay in the same cohort exclusively throughout this period? And I have to say that that may not be possible, though that's the goal, that we may have to combine students into multiple groups with multiple adults to properly supervise. So will students be exclusively throughout the entire day, only with 15, 16 students? That may not necessarily be possible in all situations, though that is our goal. The other thing that comes along with this model is the fact that we have to use outdoor space. There is no way that we can do this with limited indoor space. So there is a caveat here that the half-day extended learning portion of the day, when we are anticipating inclement weather or bad air quality days, that we would have to work out a system to notify parents, to give enough notice that we would not be holding that extended learning period on those days. And then finally, we have made a commitment that we truly want to get our special needs students who are in special day classes to be on campus for full days. We understand how critically important the routine is, and for them to get services on a daily basis. So we have special education SDC services will be full days except for that Wednesday half day. Now shifting to the secondary. Secondary, same thing, 3 levels. We're starting in distance learning, but if we get to the point to move to a modified in-person learning, this model will be also this will be rather a 2 cohort model. It will be 50% of the students on campus and 50% of the students off campus. On this slide, we show that it's a half day morning and a half day afternoon, depending on which cohort you're in. But as Mr. Drake stated, we need to find the best model that is seamless with distance learning. So this could also be a full day, Monday, Thursday, the odd classes, and Tuesday, Friday, the even classes, and Wednesdays are done to provide support for students with individual needs. So that model, when we get closer to that, will be communicated to parents, but it will be based on a normal structure, not the 4x4 that was previously announced, with the exception of Estancia High School. Estancia High School will be going through an approval process, and they will maintain very likely the 4x4 model. But the other schools, high schools and middle schools, will maintain the regular 6-period or 8-period structure. Now, there is a couple of exceptions that's listed on here. Early college, high school, due to their configuration and alignment with the community colleges, will stay on the normal semester system, and Back Bay Monte Vista will be on their normal trimester system. So with that, we will answer some questions on the 3-level plan.
Okay, let's see. So now would be a time to talk about the waiver. There's a lot of questions about that.
All right. So I stated earlier that the governor has issued an executive order that says that we are not to reopen while our county is on the watch list, and then cannot reopen for 14 days. There is an exception that the state has allowed, and that is the waiver. So for those of you who are not familiar with that, the waiver is an opportunity for districts to apply for all of their elementary schools to reopen in person, even though the county is still on the watch list. Okay, the state just issued guidance. We are currently analyzing that guidance. We have not made a decision whether we're going to pursue that. But if we choose to pursue that, what this means is we need to gain the support of our labor employee unions, as well as our parent organizations district-wide. So there is quite a bit of a process to gain that support. And there's also attestations, meaning that we have to prove that our safety plans and safety measures are in place. We also have to submit this to the Orange County Health County officer, who will then analyze the data and make a determination whether this should be moved forward to the state level for final approval. So that's a very lengthy process. And I'm not quite sure what's going to happen sooner, a process like that, or our county just coming off the watch list. Okay, but at this point, we're analyzing the guidance. We have not made a determination whether we're going to pursue the waiver in our district or not.
There's some questions around level 2 at the middle school, but I'm sure others have it, about each class getting cleaned between each group of students and what the maximum number of students will be. Right.
So what we plan to do is, with the middle school and the high schools, is roughly classes will be about 50% of their normal capacity. We're very fortunate here in Newport-Mesa to have generally, and our county ratios, student to teacher ratios, are one of the lowest in the county. So approximately it's going to be half of the students. So if we have a class of 32, it would be 16. If we have a class of 36, it could be 18. But we're going to make sure that we maximize the space in the class as much as possible, level out our classes so that the numbers, even at 50%, stays within the space that's allowable in a classroom. Now, every now and then, even though there's standard classrooms, we might have some classrooms that are a little bit larger. We might be able to put a few more students in there, and some that are a little bit lower, and we might have to have fewer students in there. But the goal is to maximize the space and allow for the social distancing to occur.
There's questions about siblings being on the same schedules.
Right. We would love to be able to match schedules with families. If you heard me talk in prior board meetings, one of the ideas was if they are on with the same last name, we try to keep them in the same schedule. I will have to say that the scheduling and coordinating of everything is going to make that simple idea impossible. However, school sites, as they build the schedule, if that can be accommodated, that would be great, but we cannot guarantee that. We cannot guarantee that that would occur because there's so many moving parts with scheduling and building master schedules, particularly in this environment. So something that we can't guarantee, but certainly we have an interest to support our families in that.
Russell, there's a couple of questions about in the elementary, when we go back and there's the extended day, if it's required, if the parents choose not to have their students in that program, what time they would be picked up, or how they determine if students are going to be in the morning or in the afternoon.
Correct. So you notice that those slides with the features do not give the actual bell schedule or class schedule for each individual school site. So these are the features of that plan. The specific school sites, when they get to that point and put this plan together in detail, that information will be sent out to parents. So they'll know exactly what time the morning session ends, the afternoon session begins. Of course, there's a lot of logistical stuff there to make sure that we provide enough space and safety for students and families to transition from morning to afternoon.
There are questions regarding dual immersion, and I believe it's related to the virtual school
Okay.
and whether that would be provided in the virtual school.
All right. So let me just briefly respond to that. So we have been asked about students who are in our dual immersion programs, whether they can take the virtual school option and remain in the dual immersion program. I need to say right now, I'm not sure that's going to occur because, as you heard from Dr. Shaka, you know, this program is going to have limited options, and we are not going to be able to provide individual sections for students in dual immersion. However, we're working with some of the leaders of that program to see if there is a way to do something for our dual immersion students so that they can continue their study in the dual languages. So that was a little bit of a unique question and a unique challenge that we're going to be looking at. But we do not believe the virtual school is going to be that option.
Still scrolling.
We've got one more section to cover, and that's safety measures.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to go back to this document here, which is our reopening plan. It's on our webpage and was sent to everybody last Friday. And I showed you the table of contents earlier, and there are several pages in there that talk about the safety features. And I want to make sure that parents know that if we did move to in-person, what are some of the things that they can expect on campus in the terms of safety measures. So here's a slide related to supplies as well as some of our procedures. So I'm going to ask a couple of our directors who are here this evening, and I'm going to ask John Geisler, who is our Director of Purchasing and Warehouse, just to give you a brief update in terms of the supplies and items that we are prepared to have on site when we move to in-person learning. So, Mr. Geisler?
Thank you, Superintendent Lee-Sung. Good evening, everybody. So just a brief update on how we're going to handle safety and supplies when it comes to personal protective equipment on campuses when kids come back to school. Since the beginning of the COVID crisis, we've been working to make sure that Newport-Mesa Unified has sufficient stock and availability on personal protective equipment, both in sizes to fit children that are in K-6 and children who are in 712, because we all know that the little kids needed to have different protective equipment than the kids in the high schools and the middle schools. And we've been working on that through this crisis and have brought in sufficient stock to be able to provide daily PPE to anyone who comes to school without a mask or who needs a mask. For the kids when they return to school, we've also been lucky enough to receive an allocation of some personal protective equipment from the state of California And part of that was masks and hand sanitizers and face shields, things to help protect the students when they're in class and help protect our staff as well. And those will be distributed to the students as well, including an allocation of some cloth masks that we received from the state, which will go directly to the students when they return to school. As we move forward, we've put in a comprehensive plan to be able to manage the needs of our students as we return to the classroom. And we have a process in place for tracking the needs of personal protective equipment so that it will always be available and there will always be supplies on hand to make sure that we're able to take care of our students.
All right, thank you, Mr. Geisler. And now I want to ask Lance Bidnick, our Director of Maintenance and Operations, to talk about disinfecting and cleaning that's been done on our campuses.
Mr. Lee-Sung, I apologize for interrupting. I just need to make a statement regarding Spanish interpretation. Si alguien ocupa interpretación al español, por favor vean abajo a la derecha de su pantalla hay un botón que dice interpretación. Si opriman ese botón, ahí pueden escoger español y deben de poder oír todo esto en ese idioma. Y si están haciendo preguntas en español, también tenemos algunas personas que están respondiendo en español. Gracias. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Annette. Okay, Mr. Bidnick, if you can talk about disinfecting procedures, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Superintendent. Disinfecting procedures is a very important topic for our custodians. We are reallocating and distributing staff to make sure that we can accomplish this as much as possible. We're following all of the CDC and EPA guidelines. This is the priority for us to be able to do daily disinfecting of every classroom for the safety of the students and our staff. While we have certain functions that might not be occurring, we're going to be using those custodial positions to be able to shift around resources and provide as much flexibility so we can take care of all these things that are listed here on this slide. The high focus or high priority focus is going to be on these high touch surfaces that are outlined on this slide as recommended by the CDC. We're using the EPA and CDC recommended products and methods to make sure that everything that we use is rated for indoor air quality and is effective against COVID-19.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bidnick. There was a question asked earlier about cleaning in between classrooms. So there's actually several methods that I know our principals have already been thinking about in terms of their scheduling. So the fewer transitions between students, obviously the better. And when there is a gap in time, whether it be a nutrition break or a lunch break or a full day, those are always the ideal situations. So we do not have to do as many cleanings in between groups of kids. The other thing that principals have talked about is dedicating or assigning certain space for kids. So if you can imagine a classroom with 30 students and 30 desks, the students are assigned to their desk and they're not to be touching or moving to other people's desks. So we try to maintain a dedicated space for individual students as much as possible to do as much cleaning as we can in between any of the transitional periods. So again, this is one of the challenges, and that's why scheduling and transitions are a big part of this, because our custodial services can only go so far, and we're going to be able to hopefully accomplish this through a variety of means to keep things as clean and disinfected as possible. All right, I want to move to the next slide and go into another area of safety. And that's on a school campus and in the classroom. Okay, we obviously are working to maintain social distancing as much as possible through the models that we have been proposing. A lot of signage. Jonathan Geisler, who you heard just from a few minutes ago, is working to get signage, standard signage throughout our schools. We also are putting up clear screens in our front offices, and we're going to talk about face coverings in detail in just a moment, but also looking at routes so that we are making sure that we don't have bottlenecks and groups of kids congregating in certain spaces, to have designated routes, designated entry and exit points, and making sure we also limited the number of visitors and people on campus. And the whole idea is that we have as few individuals on campus as possible. In the classroom, we're also promoting individualized items. So not sharing, making sure we avoid sharing of objects. And Lance Bidnick, could you talk a little bit about the water bottles? I think that one you can speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. So we have a number of drinking fountains throughout all of our schools that are able to be retrofitted with a bottle filling station. Our crews are working right now to install these retrofit kits on over 100 drinking fountains throughout the district. That's currently in place or in progress, and we should be wrapping that up in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. In terms of recess, I know I've said this several times that we absolutely feel that's important for kids to have their time outside. And the assignment, and this is part of the state guidance as well, is that we would assign areas for individual classes or grade levels to, again, promote as much distancing as possible. When we start, we're going to have to close off our playground equipment. We really would like to reopen that, but we got to go in stages. So we're going to start off with playground equipment closed, but we could reopen it if we make sure that we've got systems in place to keep that clean and also make sure kids are washing their hands. The school bus is another area that we are already thinking about, that we are going to need to require any passenger and of course the bus driver to wear face coverings on the bus at all times. We're going to maximize the space. In this situation, we are not going to be able to keep a strict 6-foot social distancing in a school bus, but we're going to have to maximize the space the best that we can, keep the windows open, and keep the air circulating in there. Because of the spacing, and it won't be the normal spacing that we have where we usually fill buses up to its capacity, that's going to mean that we're going to have to limit the routes. We have to prioritize our special needs students and transport them to school, but we're also going to have to make some decisions on which routes we're going to continue and which routes that we are going to have to discontinue. And that might be predicated on the distance between the route and the home and the school. But those are things that we are currently analyzing. We need to determine how many students truly need transportation, which is part of the survey or the parent intent to participate forms that we've sent out. There's a question about transportation. So we can start analyzing that and transport as many kids as we can safely with the social distancing on the bus. All right, now I want to talk about face coverings. This has been a very controversial topic, as you know, in the media. But a few weeks ago, we had some very clear guidance that came down from the state in terms of what face coverings and face shields are. So I'm going to ask Sarah Jocham to highlight the key features of this slide.
Okay, thank you again. I was answering a couple of questions about face coverings in the chat already. So at this time, we are following the state guidance from the Department of Healthcare on what are we mandated to do in order to keep students and staff safe on campus. So once students return to school, anyone 3rd grade and above will be required to wear a face covering and to maintain social distance. And the face coverings will be worn throughout the day with the exception of while they're eating or drinking. But other than that, we expect that they will be wearing a face covering. There are some exceptions for students who have special needs or a health or a medical condition that will not allow them to do that. And maybe for some of our students who are hearing impaired and are not able to wear a face covering either. But that is our expectation for all of our employees and then also for our students.
Right. Okay, this next slide talks about screening. And so I will also ask Sarah and possibly Leona and Mary to discuss this.
Sure. So one of the things that we are doing right now on our school campuses, our district facilities, is instituting a wellness screening for our staff who are coming onto campus. And this includes two parts. One is considered a passive screening, and this is employees before they come to work in the morning. They determine whether or not they have a fever over 100.4, or if they have any new symptoms that are kind of listed below there. You'll see all of the symptoms on the bottom of the slide. If they have any of those symptoms, they are asked to stay home and take time and to use sick time and recover. Once staff comes into work, we are doing a wellness screening where they are asked the same questions again. And then also they are taking a no-touch temperature. And any employee who does not pass that screening is going to be sent home. And right now we are looking at, so this would be for anybody who comes onto our campuses. There were a couple of questions in the chat about what about volunteers or visitors. And one of the things we're looking at doing is really limiting the people who come onto our school campuses. Once we open, we want to ensure that our students and our staff are safe, and we're going to really limit the amount of people who can just come onto our campus for different reasons. But if people need to come onto our campus for reasons, we are going to screen them. Everyone will wear a sticker that demonstrates that they have been screened and that they're okay to be on the campus. At this time, when students come back, we're going to ask parents and students to do the passive screening in the morning before they come to school, ask themselves those questions about how they feel. And we're still in the process of determining whether or not we're going to do thermometer temperature checks for students when they come. But right now, that's our plan.
All right, thank you. And I've been saying this throughout this whole crisis, that the guidance keeps evolving and changing, and this is based on the guidance as it stands today. I want to go back one slide because there was one key point here that I wanted to make about face coverings. And so the state in the guidance says that this is a requirement. And I'm going to point out the line right in here that says, other than the exceptions below, anybody who refuses to wear a face covering could be sent home. And so I want to highlight that is something that we will be adhering to, that if students refuse to do this, obviously we'll go through a process, communicate with the student, with the parent, provide a mask if they forgot it. But this is a very important aspect of everybody's safety, is that this face covering rule is complied with. Okay, this next slide, I know a lot of parents have been asking questions about, okay, what happens if there is a confirmed case of COVID-19 on campus? So what happens in that situation? So Sarah and Mary.
I'll turn it over to Mary after I just say that one of our big priorities in looking at people who are positive for COVID or who are what we consider close contact is to keep that information confidential and really honor that commitment for both our staff and for our students within our community, that we will deal with the issue and do what we need to do, but to try and maintain confidentiality as much as possible in dealing with the situation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Graska, our Director of Healthcare Services, just to walk us through our current process for dealing with somebody positive or in close contact.
Good evening. We do have a long-standing relationship with the Orange County Healthcare Agency. That's our local health department. And they provide guidance to us in terms of how to manage communicable disease. And currently, we are working with our employees when there are employee concerns, and we have a process and procedure in place to work with that employee and to monitor the employee and ensure that the employee clears the infection before returning to work. And it will be a very similar process, as you can see on the slide, that whenever there's a positive COVID case at school, whether it's a student or a staff member, we are going to notify and work collaboratively with the Orange County Healthcare Agency. And typically, individuals are quarantined for up to 14 days. And there may be some variance in that depending on the particular situation. And it's important to note that we will be monitoring attendance. School nurses typically will follow up when students are not in attendance and identify the reason for their absence. And if it's an illness, then we're going to investigate that. If parents, and we would hope that parents would notify us if their children are ill or if they're diagnosed with COVID, and we will then collaborate again with the Orange County Healthcare Agency. We will monitor, and we are looking for clusters of illness. And so if there are multiple individuals who are ill in a classroom or at a school or throughout the school district that meet the criteria that is defined by the Orange County Healthcare Agency, then there could be closures of a particular classroom, of a school, or even multiple school sites. We are in constant communication with our community, and the district will definitely issue notification. We also would have to post signage as to the status of our schools. When we are aware of a coronavirus case of infection, then there's also communication with our maintenance and operations division, and that area where a person who was infected had occupied space will be cleaned and then disinfected. And then of course, if a school is closed or a classroom is closed, there will be notification about when we would be able to open back up.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. All right, so I have one more slide here. And Mary, this is standard stuff that we've been hearing since this crisis began. But could you just say a few words on this? Not go too deep, but just a few words. That this is critically important.
So I think the main highlight on this slide is if individuals are sick, stay home. If you're not sure, stay home. The other area that's critically important is hand washing. So I won't go into the details of it, but frequent hand washing during those important times during the day. And then keeping your hands away from your face. It's really important that if you're going to touch your face, you wash your hands first. And then physical distancing. So we've all heard about that also. Maintaining a minimum of 6 feet whenever practicable is highly recommended.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to pause here for questions regarding safety measures, but I actually got a request from Principal Shaka that there was one question that has been found in the Q&A that he would like to address related to athletics and virtual schools. So maybe we'll pause safety measures for a moment and go back to Dr. Shaka on that question.
Thank you, Russell. And I'm reading through these questions and we're doing our best to keep up, but I do see a number of questions regarding athletics as it relates to the cloud campus. And it's a more complicated response than just typing in the chat. So I do want you to know that for athletics, for CIF, we're required to have students take at least 4 classes at their home school. The structure we're looking at with our cloud campus, we feel will meet that requirement and allow students to participate. However, it's more complicated than that because the leagues that most of our schools participate in have bylaws, and those bylaws have some really tricky language that we're trying to interpret. And it's a process of interpreting that language to ensure our students would or would not be eligible. So we want to be transparent and share that it's not as crystal clear, and we cannot at this time guarantee they would be eligible. We are working to get that answer, but we can't say with certainty yes or no at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Shaka. I just want to illustrate or emphasize rather how critically important for us to make sure that if we do this, that we can offer that. Being a former high school principal and associated with high school competitive athletics, the penalty for using an ineligible player in a competition is forfeiture of that game. So this is very high stakes in terms of making sure that it complies with all the bylaws in terms of the leagues as well as CIF. So this is a question that we were hoping to give a definitive answer. And unfortunately, you heard the answer Dr. Shaka gave, that we're working on it, but cannot be definitive at this point. So, so thank you for clarifying that. Okay, if we can go back to safety measures, and if there's any questions on this topic, we'll try to address that.
On the safety measures, most of the questions we've answered.
So I think one that kind of fits into the safety measure is there's some different questions about if someone starts in distance learning and the district makes the decision to come back to school, it's been deemed safe by the state, or we're off the watch list and we go back to school, but parents are still not comfortable with that, you know, in terms of the safety measures or whatever else. Do parents at any point have the option, we're saying virtual school is a year, but do they have an option to go from distance to virtual once we make the switch back to 100% in school or a hybrid?
Right. And you know, I put that back in the category of switching mid-year. At this time, the answer is no. But, you know, circumstances have been changing so much throughout the year. And like I stated before, the reason for my no at this point is we really cannot have large shifts of students moving from one program to the other because it has such a significant impact. If there's an individual student case and there's something that we need to consider, we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis. And certainly we want to meet the needs of our students, particularly if it's a health-related matter. But the general response is no. But you know, as we try to do in this district, is we really do try to meet the needs of our students. So even though I'm saying no, there's always individual cases and circumstances that we might need to consider. Okay.
And then I don't know if Mike is, Dr. Shaka is still available, but there also seems to be, and maybe you've already answered this, but people aren't quite sure of the answer, just about the, is it self-directed? Are there certain times of day, you know, that people, if you're in the virtual school, are you in school from 8 to 3, or is it you have to log on at any, is it self-directed, teacher-directed? And then lots of questions about electives, and maybe we don't know the answers to all of those, but those seem to keep coming up.
Absolutely, I can speak to both those. So the first one is, and it's important clarification, this is not homeschool. There's a teacher assigned to the class, and the teacher is responsible for moving the students' learning forward in conjunction with the students to ensure subject mastery. Now, that said, the flexibility is important to understand. While we want to build a model where students can be successful in a more flexible environment, there will certainly be scheduled synchronous times throughout the day in kindergarten through 12th grade. The students for kindergarten through 12th grade can all expect between 60 and 90 minutes of synchronous time per day. So if you look at a high school student, you're looking at if they're taking 3 classes that day on a block schedule system, which many of them are, they're looking at about 30 minutes per class per class period, and the rest of that class period would be spent in asynchronous. So I want to make sure it's very clear that students will have synchronous time at a specific time. However, in the cloud school, we are doing everything we can to provide opportunities to be successful, even if they're not able to consistently attend that synchronous time, although it will be a loss of that instructional experience. For electives, I do want to speak to electives because I see a lot of questions about electives at middle school and high school. So the process is working like this. We're in the process right now of collecting the intent to participate in the cloud campus. Once we see those numbers, we're going to get a clear idea of who those students are, what grade level they're in, and what courses they have requested. So we'll be looking at those individual course requests, and we will do our best to look at the electives, for example, that are most requested and lend themselves to the virtual environment. So the example I used last night was, if a lot of kids select ceramics, that's probably not going to be a real good fit for the distance environment. So we would probably not be really excited to offer ceramics as an elective. But if a large number of students request computer programming, for example, we might say that could be a great fit, and we'd make those connections. So I see request after request on the questions to say, can you give me an exact list of what electives will be available, or an exact list of what AP classes will be available? And we can't do that until we get the intents to participate, and we're able to sift through them and look at the trends of course requests. We really want to build a schedule that is driven off student interests, but we will definitely not be able to offer all of the electives. So I know we don't have all the information right now, but we really need to look at what the students are requesting for electives.
Dr. Shocker, can you address CTE as well in both virtual school and distance learning?
Absolutely. CTE would fall into that same category as elective. Clearly, CTE classes many of them have the opportunity to lend themselves to a distance environment. And again, if we have an adequate number of students who are requesting that class, and it works out with running the class on our end, I think that would be fantastic. So again, looking at some of our CTE classes, like computer programming, engineering, those classes can lend themselves very well. Sometimes digital art, classes that really speak to the distance format, we will look at. Again, culinary might be a little more challenging. So CTE certainly will have a place in the cloud campus. I wish I could speak to more specifics, but our plan and hope is to, once we look at the intents to participate, which we'll have Friday evening, then we'll be spending a lot of time right after that to look through those, and to be able to communicate with students and families as soon as possible to say, hey, here's what our options will be.
And then there's still a lot of questions around GATE and elementary and in the cloud campus.
Yeah, so GATE is another tricky one. As of this time, I have not planned a GATE program to occur in our elementary schools. However, we are looking at the needs and the requirements as well. And should the needs and requirements for GATE exist, we will, at a minimum, ensure that we have a curriculum that challenges the unique needs of our GATE students. And if there is a requirement to have a formal GATE program, we will certainly meet whatever requirements that we're obligated to meet.
There are a few questions regarding childcare for working families who need to support their child during distance learning. I'm not sure if we have a response for that at this time.
Other than the fact that we do have a page in our reopening plan that we are trying to gather information on resources of childcare for our families. The county Office of Education last spring, when all of this occurred, started to gather that information for our parents. So we're going to be adding that page to our reopening plan, or actually populating that page in our reopening plan. The page is there, but we are trying to get updated information, and we'll put that in there.
Russell, there needs to be just some clarification about The intent to participate and filling that form out as far as, I know that we know the deadline's on, well, I guess I can just answer this. So, so the deadline to complete the form is Friday, but there will be a confirmation communication sent out to you as quickly as we can possibly get it to you, early next week, just as a confirmation that this is what we have, that you selected this or you selected this. And so you'll be able to know, have that confirmation.
Okay, any other questions?
There are a lot of questions that have not yet been answered. Some of them are a bit more detailed. Is there something we'd like to say about where people can go for questions? I feel as though some of this may be directed to their school principals for responses, while others may be us at the district level continuing to formulate responses to some of their questions.
Okay. All right, so as we stated at the beginning, we knew there'd be a lot of questions and some we're not going to be able to get to. Some might be very specific. So I know that staff is going to be looking through the questions. If they are generalized questions that we believe could be something that everyone would benefit, we will be updating some FAQs and provide that information. If they're more specific and it might be more appropriate for Dr. Shaka or their site principal, that's another option. As I mentioned earlier, we also have brought back our school community facilitators to work and support our parents. So that's another source as well. And I also encourage everybody to look at our reopening plan if you haven't done that. But unfortunately, I do want to kind of close with this very important understanding that what we have been challenged to do is to build a school, a brand new school, all the way from K to 12, literally in weeks. And this is a process that typically not only would take a year of planning, but usually when new schools are built, it's done very systematically, one grade level at a time. And unfortunately, in this situation, we have been tasked to do this, I think for all the right reasons. And we're working diligently to put this school together. And I really hope that everybody understands that we wish we could be so much more clear and definitive and precise with our responses to your questions. But this is literally, we are building this as we speak. And we're going to do our very best to build the best school. We've got some great, incredible leaders, but these are very complex issues that we're trying to resolve in a very, very short period of time. So we hope that you keep that in consideration. We hope that you can make the best decision for your family. There will be that confirmation step, and there very likely is going to be a communication from your school site to make sure that that truly is the best decision with all the information that you need. So with that, I do want to say that we'll try to respond to the individual questions as much as we can, do FAQs, and continue to provide information to everybody. So I thank you for your time and attending and participating by submitting questions, and hopefully we will get through this crisis sooner than later and be back to normal with all of our kids. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists who responded today, and have a good evening.